Now you're live.
Good morning. This is the Senate Apportionment Committee. It is Wednesday, January 19th, I believe. And thank you, Senator Collmore. And we are here. We will be meeting every morning for people's information. We will be meeting every Wednesday morning at 8 and every Friday at noon, 12:15. So what we're going to do today is I don't see Jeremy with us yet, but Tom, we're going to hear as much as we can today of the majority report and the minority report. And I would suggest, committee, that we ask technical questions for clarification when the reports are given to us, that and I'm sure that the people will justify why they made those decisions and how they got to them. And then, but we won't have the discussion on whether we like them or not today, because we want to get through the reports themselves. Does that make sense, committee? All right, great. So Tom, take it away. You're on mute. You are still, there you go.
That is true. I'm jumping around from screen to screen. Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you for inviting us to be here again. I don't want to repeat my prior testimony to the committee, which I think was background testimony about, among other things, the purpose and structure of the apportionment board, the approach that the apportionment board took to its work in face of the significant delay we encountered from the U.S. Census Bureau in delivering the final census data, and how over time the board's membership sort of split into two cohorts concerning a high-level approach to redistricting involving using all single-member districts versus not using exclusively single-member districts. So I think I covered that in prior testimony. I know the committee members are now eager to get involved in mapping work, and we have people here from the board who can help with that interest of the committee. I think what I often do before taking a swing at this work is to go back to the census data itself and look at a map of the existing Senate districts in this case, and see what the population deviations are now using the 2020 census data in the existing Senate districts. That's where you can see that at the very least some significant work needs to be done to adjust district lines so that there is again substantial equality across all Senate districts. So doing nothing is not an option under the law, and everybody on the apportionment board agreed about that. The apportionment board website, with the assistance of the John Adams at the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, also has some very handy data on a town-by-town basis and a county-by-county basis. So we've got the 2020 census data, county by county, Senate district by Senate district, and town by town, which can be very useful when you're trying to adjust a Senate district's population by moving lines around. You can look and see, okay, well, if I add this town to that Senate district, I will be increasing its population by X people, and that will show the resulting population and the deviation of that population, not only for the Senate district that you may want to move that town into, but the impact on the Senate district that that town is currently in, which will then be reduced. And if you play around with those data for a little while, you get a little better at the feel for that, and you can anticipate some of those consequences, and over time get a more of an intuitive feel for what it would be like to change Senate districts. So as we've talked before, the apportionment board by a majority vote in November voted for an all single member Senate district plan that was delivered to the Secretary of the Senate at the very end of November. And in early January, a written report to accompany that map was prepared and filed as well, which has a narrative explanation of how the apportionment board went about its work, and also a district by district description of the towns that are proposed to be included in each single member Senate district. It also, for each district, in a narrative tells where those towns are now in a Senate district, and what county they're in. So you can see that sort of three-part mix of what is the town's current Senate district, what's its proposed Senate district, and what county is it in. And in many cases, those are all the same thing, but not in all cases. And in some cases, a town is being proposed to move into a Senate district in a different county, not too many times, however. Then there is the minority member map, or alternate map, as we sometimes call it, and a written report that goes along with that. And finally, there is but not last, but certainly not least, the majority members of the apportionment board have a rebuttal or response to the minority report. That's all available for you and posted, etc. But board member Jeremy Hansen and board member Rob Roper from the majority group are here and could, I believe, give you an overview of the process they took to actually form those single member Senate districts. But I'm sure they could also start, if you wished, Madam Chair, with a description or an explanation of the single member district concept and why they gave that priority. So I will let the chair take the next lead in directing the testimony, understanding that we've got about 45 more minutes in this segment this week.
Thank you, Tom. So what I think that we should be doing, our plan was, is to go through the majority report, have you present it to us, and it's your show. So you want to talk to us about how you got there, why you got there, what the districts look like. It really is your show. And so that would be Jeremy and Rob. Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Tom, I'm on your website and trying to, so that I'm prepared to follow along, but I can't find, I know this is pathetic, but I can't find the original census Senate map before you guys made your different proposals, where you started with the deviations and everything as it was from the census. Under Senate maps, I just don't see it.
Okay, I will ask one of my fellow apportionment board members if they can post a link to that in the chat in the next couple of minutes.
Or
Okay.
email it
Thank
to
you.
us. Don't do chat.
Post it in the chat, please. Jeannie is here. Mr. Roper and Mr. Hanson will be presenting to us.
And we can
Perhaps
al-
Jeannie.
We'll also email it to Mike Ferrant.
Okay,
Great,
all
thanks.
right. Thank you. So I haven't seen either of you around the State House for a long time. Of course, we haven't seen anybody around the State House for a long time, but used to seeing you coming in, Mr. Roper, to speak to us in government operations. And Professor Hanson, I believe it is, you helped us out tremendously when we were trying to work out the way to conduct audits on our elections. I remember that. That was many, many years ago. So welcome, and the show is yours. You can take, I think that first, I hate to take the time to do this, but I think it would be helpful to you for us to introduce ourselves and which district we are currently from. I'm Jeanette White, and I am Wyndham District.
Brian Collmore, Rutland District.
Chris Pearson, Chittenden District.
Randy
Alice
Brock,
Clarkson, Winter District.
Wait, Randy,
Randy Brock, Franklin District.
Allison,
Holly Star, Orleans, Essex District.
Allison,
Allison Clarkson, Windsor District.
And Andrew Kirchlick, Washington County District.
if we do this again, we might think about going alphabetically since there are so many of us. Thank you. All right, take it away.
Rob,
You
you're
are
muted.
Muted.
Jeremy, will you want me to start off or would you like to kick it off?
Yeah, why don't you start it off and I will take it from there.
Okay. Well, thank you all members of the committee and Chairman White for having us today. Basically, we started off with, to understand the Senate map, a proposal that we put forward, you have to have a little bit of background in the House map, because the structure of the Senate map that we created was all single member districts for the House, and each Senate district is made up of 5 House districts. So there's a mathematical precision to what we put together. Now, the reason that there are several reasons why we settled on a single member district map for both the House and the Senate, and all based on the concept of equity. And our basic feeling was, from a general standpoint, philosophically speaking, the members of the committee debated back and forth about the merits of single member districts and multi-member districts. And basically what we found was that from a constituent standpoint, somebody who has multiple members representing them in Montpelier has a different dynamic to the way they're represented than somebody who just has a single representative or senator in Montpelier. And it's not that one is necessarily better than the other, it's just a question of separate but equal, and separate but equal is never equal. And we got actually a lot of feedback from the BCAs. The BCAs don't comment on the Senate map that we put out, only on the House, but a lot of the folks who were arguing to keep their multi-member districts did so in a way that sort of reinforced our original predisposition, saying, well, it seems fair if everybody has the same number of people representing him. And they would say, well, we want to keep our 2-member district because it's better for us to have 2 people representing us in Montpelier. Or, so, one town said, well, when we have 2 members, a constituent may not get along with 1 member, but they feel more comfortable talking to the other member, which is true. And that's a positive aspect of a 2-member district, but it's not a benefit that is shared by a member of a single member district. So there were a lot of comments like that. We also looked at it from the point of view of being able to run for office. And it is more expensive to run in a multi-member district than it is to run in a single member district, which could affect the kind of candidates who are able to run, which ultimately could affect the kind of representation that different people in different districts get from a multi-member district. And the basic equity there. And then there was also, we had testimony from Susanna Davis from the Racial Equity Task Force and Brittany Wilson from the Racial Equity Task Force. And they put out a report in January of 2020, and that mentioned, how to approach redistricting and like through their perspective. And that report, so I'll just read that. They don't write a lot on it in there. There's just a couple of paragraphs, but the critical one is they asked us to make racial equity an explicit criterion in the redistricting decisions. Extensive political research and case law have demonstrated that in most of the US states and localities have taken increasingly flagrant tactics designed to suppress and dilute the votes of communities of color. One such tactic is the use of multi-member districts. So that carried some weight in our decision to move to an all single member district map as well. That's basically the approach we came to making the House map, is getting back to those single member putting together all single member districts. And then the Senate map, I'll let Jeremy speak more to the Senate map, but it was basically from a simplicity and a representational standpoint, it made sense to us to have 5 single member districts make up a multi-member district. I will add one more thought to our single member thing, and that is the legislation that you all passed mandating that we break up the Chittenden County 6-pack. So just from a cultural standpoint within the Senate, that seemed to us like there was an understanding that breaking that down a little bit made sense. So that a small part, but a part in our decision to move towards single member districts. Jeremy, I'll hand the baton to you.
Thanks, Rob. So Jeremy Hansen from Berlin. I'm the progressive appointee for the Legislative Apportionment Board. And I also want to point out, Rob, there was something you didn't mention, and that's Chapter 2, Section 13 of the Vermont Constitution, which says pretty explicitly, the first thing it says, I can just read it. The House of Representatives shall be composed of 150 representatives, no surprises, not changing that. The voters of each representative district established by law shall elect 1 or 2 representatives from that district, the number from each district to be established by the General Assembly, and here we are. The next part is, how do you do that? In establishing representative districts, which shall afford equality of representation. So that's the first clause about how you go from there. Doing that, then they talk about geographical compactness and contiguity and adhering to boundaries of counties and political subdivisions. So we were really looking at, again, the equality of representation. And yeah, so 5 single member districts for the House corresponds to the 30 members of the Senate, 5-1. So we were able to take collections of 5 single member House districts, and those became Senate districts. I'm happy to talk more about anything more in the weeds. I think Rob basically covered it. I just wanted to make sure that we had the kind of the constitutional citation in there as well.
So did you want to go over the map with us, or how would you propose doing this? I know that members have looked at the map, probably. I don't know if you wanted to go into more detail on the map itself, or if committee members have questions at this point.
I'm
Yes,
I'm happy to do however you'd like to.
Okay, I think Senator Perchlik has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Either one, Jeremy or Rob, that constitutional reference about equality, is there any case law that you guys talked about how that was viewed? Because you could view a 2-member district as being equal because per person they have the same number. I get the whole point and argument about the single member districts, but I didn't know if there was any clarity on that or any case law that more clearly define what is meant by that clause. If it really means, each one member districts, or does it mean just if you divide it, then it's equal?
Thanks, Senator. That's a good question. That was something I should have mentioned as well, that I did mention to House GovOps when I chatted with them a week or so ago. And one of the things that we said is that if all of the districts were also two-member districts, if they're two-member districts, if they're all one-member districts, either way, that's fine. That suggests to me equality of representation. But if we have a mixed bag of single-member districts, some one way, and then others multi-member districts, that suggests to me not equality of representation. Your case law question, so not an attorney, but as far as we could tell, there was not any case law that kind of probed that particular phrase. Nobody had brought suit based on that phrase. Other parts of this have certainly been tested in different contexts, in the context of apportionment and otherwise, but that equality of representation phrase, that hasn't been tested so far.
Yeah, did you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, thanks, Senator. Just real quickly, so to clarify what the majority interpreted is, it's either all one-member districts or all two-member districts. So even though the Constitution says one or two, you meant it, the way you guys interpreted that was all one or all two, not a mix.
Right, with the idea that when a person, a Vermont voter, goes to vote for their representatives and senators, wherever you live, you're voting for the same number of House members or the same number of Senate members as anyone else in the state.
Thank you. Senator Starr?
Yes, your comment, when we voted, I believe in the Senate to break up the six-pack issue in Chittenden County, we didn't in any way mean to wreck the six-pack system. I think most of us were thinking about setting up some two-member House districts or Senate districts, have two members in it. And as far as I represented that district in the House for many years, and in rural parts of the state, if you open that up to two-member districts, you're covering, in Essex County, you'd be covering the whole county. And by having single-member districts, it breaks the number of towns up that you're representing in those rural areas so that you can handle all the different issues within that geographic area. So I mean, I don't want to disparage your work, but I think you left quite a few questions by trying to be really, really fair about every little detail, and representative government isn't always fair. Select boards or trustees many times come out of a more populated part of the community, and in rural areas that may happen more than in populated areas.
But if I could just say, Senator Starr, I think one of the reasons why we decided to go with all single member districts as opposed to an all two-member district map is precisely because what you said, because of the geographic challenges in some of the more rural areas. Just made more sense to go with a single member map than a two-member map. But to Jeremy's point, from an equity legal standpoint, you could do either.
Well, and that's what I thought we were going to do, or that the board would do, but it came out that you happened to pick all single member districts instead of a combo mixture like the Constitution and what our laws state that you can have.
Senator Collmore, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you guys for being with us this morning. I'm wondering, in the majority report, what sorts of things did you give weight to in terms of picking particular towns to be aligned together in a 5-member House district. It appears sometimes they're arranged almost vertically and then sometimes horizontally. And I'm trying to get a sense of, in other words, why do these 5 towns constitute a House district versus including or excluding a couple of other towns that are in the current Senate district? Is it population? I'm just kind of curious some of the things that you might have thought about.
Sure. So as much as possible, we were trying to conform to county boundaries. And in some cases, we were trying to preserve municipal boundaries as well. Just trying to think of the right way to put this. Because the House districts sometimes went over Senate districts, because those sometimes went over county lines, sometimes those boundaries were indeed broken. But what we did, instead of following those county lines, we decided just to go with the House district lines instead. And the idea there is that folks that are in one House district can know everybody in that House district has the same senator. Were we to split off parts of House districts to be in different Senate districts to make the map neater, which we certainly could, it would be possible. You would have folks in one House district that could have 2 different senators depending on where in town or in which town they lived. And that was what we were trying to avoid.
Okay, thank you.
So, thanks. So, can I ask a little bit about you to expand a little more on the issue of equity? I understand that in many cases, the gerrymandering does affect the equity and is often done in order to that isn't the right term, but to zone out particular populations or philosophical groups. So has that happened in Vermont? Do we see that happening with the current districts that we have? And if you could just talk about that a little bit more, because in most cases, the way I see that happening is with congressional districts. And I don't know so much with state House and Senate districts if it happens in other states. But if you could just talk a little bit about the current districts that we have that are 1 or 2 member districts, and if that has been seen as trying to suppress votes and participation by creating those as 2-member districts.
Well,
Sure. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
oh, okay. Well, I guess where I'd start with that, Senator White, is yes, you're right. I think that a lot of the gerrymandering that we think of as the octopus-shaped congressional districts, but the reason that we look at multi-member districts in an equity light is it is a gerrymandering tool. There's no real way of getting around it. The reason that they use gerrymandering in those southern states is because multi-member districts are at heart a gerrymandering tool. If you look at the history of the multi-member districts in the 1950s, there were 37 states that used multi-member districts to one degree or another, and since the civil rights era in the 1960s, that number has declined to 9. West Virginia actually just got rid of theirs. There were 10. West Virginia got rid of theirs just this year, so that this is a trend that is still continuing. And Vermont is the only state that uses multi-member districts in both chambers of its legislature. The other 8 have either House multi-member districts or Senate multi-member districts, but we're the only one that has House and Senate multi-member districts. And as Vermont becomes more diverse, I do think you would see more opportunities, particularly in some of the areas around Chittenden County. It would create more opportunities for different populations to be able to run for office. And even outside of Chittenden County, I think you would see more geographic diversity in the number of and who gets elected. I mean, one example that I'll give you is from Manchester. The Manchester Boards of Civil Authority sent in their comment regarding multi-member districts, and they have a situation now where it's 4 towns in that make up a 2-member district that Manchester is the population center of. Manchester has both of the representatives from their town, and their BCA said, we understand the benefits that multi-member districts afford us, but in the interest of fairness, we support the single member district concept. And the other 3 towns in that district also wished to be split off, so that they had a chance to send somebody to Montpelier, whereas otherwise it would be very difficult for them to do that. We had a couple of examples of that. Jeremy, do you want to add anything to that, my comments?
Sure. Yeah, I don't really think we have a problem with gerrymandering in Vermont in the traditional sense. I think when we have such big districts, though, I think sometimes minority voices can be diluted, we'll say. So I live in Washington County. I live in Berlin, and certainly no offense to any of my senators, but though the senators are all Democrats. So Bill Doyle being the last senator, Republican senator in Washington County. But if there were communities that were more Republican, they may not feel terribly represented by having 3 Democrats in the Senate. Smaller districts will allow for smaller groupings and therefore potentially more minority voices. So to be clear, not a Republican, not advocating for such things. Sorry, Rob. But it just, in terms of making the district smaller, I think there's just less opportunity to dilute minority voices.
Thanks. I do understand the issue of the example you gave, Rob, of Manchester. But it doesn't always happen that way. I am a perfect example. In the primary, there were 4 people from Brattleboro who ran, and I'm not from Brattleboro, so I'm from a more rural area, and yet beat the people from Brattleboro. So it doesn't always work out that way.
No, you're correct. I mean, there's so many factors that go into any election. It's the quality of the candidate, as I'm sure is in your case, and the ability, the ability of recruitment, and the ability to raise money, the willingness of the candidate to go do the work. So there's a lot of factors that come in here, but this is one that we can control through the apportionment process.
Thanks. I have no idea, because of the way my screen is set up here. I have no idea what time it is. Senator Collmore, can you tell me?
It's 8:37, Madam Chair.
8:37. So I don't know if committee members have any more questions or comments or anything, and then we'll be getting into all of this more thoroughly as we go forward. But yes, and then when we're then we will move. I think we will have time to move then to the minority.
Madam Chair, I do have just one quick question, if I could.
Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you, Senator Pearson.
Yeah, thanks. This has been a good discussion. I'm curious, you've framed it well, your thinking. I guess I had a similar question to somebody earlier. When I look at my own house, which is sort of where I started when I looked at your map. It's a part of Burlington. It's a part of South Burlington. You've sort of clearly focused on 5 House seats and not on other community boundaries. There's a lot of ways you could do a single seat, Senate seat that would be, for instance, all within Burlington. And I guess I just wonder, was that thoughtful, or were you more just focused on sort of demonstrating what it might look like? In other words, were you saying these are what we think are sensible Senate seats, or was it more just a focus on pulling together a map with single seats? You see my question?
Sure. Yeah. For Burlington, I was under the impression I thought that we had got thought Burlington had 10 House districts and therefore 2 Senate districts. I mean, it's been a while since I've looked into the details of the map, but that was what I was trying to do when we were kind of assembling these different pieces. So yeah,
Okay, it could be my mistake. I might be thinking of the other map. So, so forgive me. It's hard to have all of this in front of me at the same time.
It is. We each need about 5 computers.
But also to your question, Senator Pearson, particularly in a place like Burlington, we did in forming the House map do our best. We sort of looked at the existing House districts and with the population and tried to keep them as intact as possible with population shifts. We had to move lines around, but certainly that's a ball we would be happy to hand off to the people in Burlington to say, you can draw these lines a lot better if you did it here and there. And we actually, when we did our House district, the first map is very different. The draft map that we did is very different from the final map that we put forward, because we really did take into consideration comments from all the BCAs that fit within our framework. And, you know, for example, like Shelburne and St. George, and they sent us, we had a line that we drew there. They sent us a question. They said, hey, we see you drew the line, but it would really work a whole lot better if you drew the line here rather than there. And it did, and we adopted that. So, and as the baton gets handed off to you in the legislature, I hope you would sort of take that one step further and listen to that feedback and draw the lines even better than we did.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Tom, I see you have a comment.
Yeah, Senator Pearson, I think that the Apportionment Board's final proposal for what's called the Burlington-1 single-member Senate district includes only Burlington. It's sort of everything north of Pearl Street, Colchester Avenue, but also includes some portions south of a portion of North Street, and then all the way out to following the river, all the way out to the end of North Avenue and Durway Drive. So I think it doesn't have, the final doesn't have any South Burlington stuff in it.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I'm just thinking of the other map. Thank you.
Thanks. Senator Clarkson, I saw you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, well, no, just a question. I mean, I appreciate, thank you very much for this presentation. I appreciate your thinking on this. And when I was in the House, I certainly saw the value of a single member district in the House. I've come to feel a little differently as I have participated in a 3-member district in Windsor County District, just because thinking regionally is part of what the Senate's job is. It charged as a representative of a whole region. And so I'm just curious what your thinking was in terms of that. I think they're different. I think the House and the Senate in some ways have different responsibilities in that regard. And I have appreciated that difference, actually, having served in both. And so I was just curious what your thoughts were about what has been I think, a valuable perspective, having a more global, a more regional understanding of the needs of a regional community.
Well, I would say, with the exception of Burlington and some other larger communities, all of the Senate districts as proposed suggest to me a fairly large region, some larger than others. I mean, I'm looking at like the Northeast Kingdom. That 1-seat district up there is rather large, and there's not really, so we could move towns around here and there, but when you're looking for a single Senate district size chunk of people, there's not that many folks in the Northeast Kingdom. It's going to have to be big. But no, I mean, I'm looking at most of these have 5, 6, 7 more towns in them. And again, with the exception of Burlington and some places in Chittenden County, I think that's true. That was not on our kind of like our list of criteria that we were shooting for as we were drawing this map. It was really, again, back to the constitutional equality of representation and making sure that everybody has the same number of representatives and the same number of senators in Montpelier.
Right, and you're really hanging a lot on numbers, on number equity rather, yeah, well, we all know, yes. Right, anyway, thanks.
Was that the end of your?
I'm not gonna go there.
Okay. Did anybody else have any questions or comments on this?
Senator White?
Yeah. Senator Perchik.
I have a question for Chair Little, but I don't know if
Okay.
that will be, if we're going to get a minority report or alternative map report, and I would hold my question for them. But
I don't know. What do you think, committee, if we have time to start that, or if we should put that off until on our Friday noon meeting when we
We have 15 minutes.
Okay.
I mean, if we could finish just before our 9 o'clock committee starts, maybe give us 2 minutes to
Yeah,
stretch.
okay, so
But I think if we have, 15 minutes now, we might I think, Tom, do you think you can do that, or would you prefer to wait?
Well, I prefer if apportionment board member Jeannie Albert could at least give you an introduction to the work that she led. And perhaps then when you reflect on that, you'll have some questions and that conversation could be finished up on Friday.
that makes sense. Okay, so does anybody else have any questions for Jeremy or Rob right now? Thank you very much. And I do appreciate the thoughtfulness that you put into this report, because whether we agree or disagree, you certainly did your homework and had real thoughtful reasons for why you chose it the way you did. So that is appreciated. So, and you certainly are welcome to be with us at any of the meetings that we have. We'll just keep you on the invitation list, so if you want to attend. So Jeannie, are you there, Jean? Oh, there you are. Okay. Would you like to just, I think you saw when we introduced ourselves, so we don't have to do that again. If you would just give us the kind of rationale for how you arrived at your minority map and report.
Sure, I'd be happy to. And thank you for having me. Jeannie Albert, and I live in Lincoln, Vermont, member of the Legislative Apportionment Board. So I guess what I will do is I will just start with my thinking and the approach that I had as I was starting to form the plan, so you get an idea of why it turned out the way it did. But really, the simple way to describe that is that I started with the statutory requirements. That was kind of where I grounded myself in the decisions and the thought process in forming districts. And looking at the Vermont statutes as well as the Constitution, I have summarized, I have this actually written, but I think in the interest of time, rather than trying to figure out how to share screens and so on, I could send this to you after, but, and I'm sure you are familiar as well, but I, extracted the five criteria that really drove my work and the decisions I made. And the first is that the standard for creating districts for senators is on a county basis. So it's really the language is pretty clear that the districts ought to be based on counties. And second is substantial equality, which is was discussed earlier today, and I think Chair Little has talked about this as well. That and I'm just reading from the statute. The standard shall be to form senatorial districts with minimum percentages of deviation from the apportionment standard for the Senate. A lot of words there, but the apportionment standard being the ideal size of a Senate district. And just to be clear there, because as you can imagine, again, based on previous testimony, there was a lot of discussion in the lab about what that meant, what equality of representation meant. And my view and the view of the other members of the minority of the board took the view that there's ample evidence that equality of representation means that districts should have the same number of people per senator or per representative if we're on the House side. And just as and doing some research, this was very interesting. My background is mathematics. That I taught mathematics, so I wasn't necessarily familiar with a lot of the historical details, although I was always interested in redistricting and elections and voting and so forth. And this concept of equal representation goes all the way back to the conversations at the Constitutional Convention. And I was, able to find some cases, especially during the 1960s, when these issues of one person, one vote, there were several cases that were decided, the ones that in particular changed, the legislative makeup in Vermont from the one town, one vote. So those decisions, there's some interesting references that go all the way back to the founding era in understanding that equality of representation means that there should be the same number of people per representative. So I'm happy to share some of those if people are interested as well. But moving on, so those two criteria, county-based districts and substantial equality, are the foundation. But then we get the additional criteria, which is introduced by the phrase, senatorial districts shall be formed consistent with certain policies insofar as practicable. Maybe a slightly fancy way to say, as far as it's possible to do, we want to avoid splitting towns and counties. We want to respect community connections, common interests, geography, and we want to use reasonably shaped districts, namely compact and contiguous territory. So those are the 5 criteria, with the 2 kind of foundational and then the others that we're supposed to take into account. It's not just a numbers game, because we have to kind of balance all of these factors. So that was my starting point, understanding what those were. And then because of the focus on counties and substantial equality, my next step was to go to the populations of the counties, which is what I did next. And I did put into the chat earlier a link to information that is also shared at the apportionment board. There's a lot of resources there, so I sympathize with anyone who is not always able to find things as quickly as they'd like. There is a link on the resources page, but the data for 2020 population was compiled in a very nice way by the Vermont Center for Geographic Information. And that was the link I put in the chat. When you look at the population of counties, and some of you may have already done this, so I don't, hopefully not repeating things you already know, but there are 8 counties that are either have a population size that means they could be a 1, 2, or 3 member Senate district, or they're very close. They're too small or too big, but by an amount that maybe doesn't require a lot of change or adjustment. And the three that are roughly the right size, that is could be a district without adding or subtracting any population, are Washington, Rutland, and Wyndham. And then there are three that are a little too small to be a district. That is, Bennington is very close to the right size to be a 2-member, but a little too small. Addison the same, and Windsor a little bit too small to be a 3-member district. Meanwhile, Franklin is a little bit too large to be a 2-member, and Lamoille is a little bit too large to be a 1-member. This would be a good time, actually, and I realize you only have a few more minutes. I'll just mention, but when I say a little bit too big or a little too small, I want to clarify that there is no hard and fast rule about to the extent to which a district might not be the exact right size. How much too big is too much, and how much too small is too much. There's some guidelines for. There are some guidelines, but the one I focused on is, again, some Supreme Court language and opinions that say that if a district if the deviations spread from largest to smallest is getting towards 16.5% or more, which would mean, say, 8% too big, 8% too small, or 7 and 9, something like that, where you're getting a spread of more than 16 or 16.5%, you're starting to get into the danger zone, if you will, for what might be legally challenged successfully. So my approach was to try to make districts that were under 8% too big or too small, just because of that knowledge. Not because you couldn't maybe have them go above that, but that was kind of my goal. And so the districts that I just described to you, the three that are Washington, Rutland, and Wyndham, their populations are all below, their deviations are all within that zone, plus 8% or minus 8%. Whereas the other counties I mentioned, their deviations they're all above 10%, some are above 15%, or below negative 10%. Okay, so in any case, what I was just trying to convey is my starting point was the criteria, the population sizes of the counties now, and then starting from there, thinking of ways to preserve counties as much as possible as Senate districts, and then make groupings in the cases of the very small counties that we have, or obviously in the case of Chittenden, how to divide it up in a reasonable way. So that's just not a lot of detail, but gives you an idea of my starting point. I did not, like the majority, I didn't come into it with a preference for any one type of district, 1, 2, or 3 member, except the only other thing I would add is I would say from testimony we received on the House side, so not entirely relevant for the Senate, but in some ways was on my mind, I tried to think about the overall geographic size of districts. It felt like once it gets to be too big, it's a bit unwieldy. And my clock says 8:58, so I want to just check in what's good for you, and if there are any quick questions now, and whether I should keep going. I was going to show the map as well, but
I think that most of us have to be in another committee at 9.
Yeah,
my guess. So what I would like, and I hate to cut you off right there because that was very interesting, and I'm sure there will be questions, is committee, does it make sense if Jeannie can join us at noon on Friday, and
Yes.
we can continue the conversation? And Okay,
Yes.
Maybe she could send us a
It-
copy of her map or
it's on the,
somebody.
it's also on the, all the resources that were given to us the other day.
Right.
I'm happy to
think
send whatever will be useful though. So if you reach,
Okay.
if there are questions and things I can provide, do let me know. Happy to do that. And
Okay,
then I can come back on Friday.
yes, and send a link to us for your map. That would be
Right.
great.
Anything in the chat, we'd really appreciate you emailing to us because we try not to do chat during the course of our committee meetings. It's very distracting. And if you could just email us the links that are in the chat, that would be great because it's frustrating on our resources that we don't have the original census
If,
results.
I believe that if
There.
we go to the site that Chris Winters pointed out to us the other day, it's all there on the Secretary of State's website, and it's called GIS or something map, and all the original census data is there.
Right. It's just sadly not in the apportionment place where it
What-
would be useful to have it. That's where everybody started and
Okay.
then where
We'll
everybody.
make sure that it's put there.
Thank you.
Happy to direct folks to that as well. And then I have just a few more minutes, to finish up a few other comments about my approach, and then I'm happy to answer questions on Friday.
Thank you so much. And I
Right.
hate to cut you off, but we have to be someplace else, all of us, and it takes a while to run up and down those stairs.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It's been
Thank
great.
you, and thank you. I thought I saw Rob still with us, but